All right. Well, salvete discipuli, or salvete omnes, meanings be well, students, or be well, all of us. I like to call us discipuli because we are all still studying Latin. I will be studying Latin till the day I die. As long as the Lord keeps my mind intact. So welcome back to our Common Latin book club podcast. And I'm your host, Jennifer Courtney. And I have with me Timothy Knotts, who is the Director of Challenge Development, and Kathy Donegia, who is the curriculum developer and author of the Common Latin Curriculum. And so we're glad that you have joined us again. I'm going to ask Kathy to flip to the next slide because we talked about this in our overview episode, but there are 6 tasks in the Common Latin Curriculum: read the Vulgate, recite catechism, memorize vocabulary, practice forms, study syntax, parse and translate verses. So in episode 1, we looked at the whole grammar strand. And I tell you this because, number 1, we've had some weeks off, and number 2, you may want to go back and see the recordings if you weren't with us. So we looked at the overview of the grammar strand, which is where we study Latin in classical conversations. And then in episode 2, we practiced task 1, read Vulgate. And we looked at John 3:16. And we listened to it and read it, and then we started to look at the individual words. And what we learned is that even beginning students can recognize some words in a familiar verse, and therefore they can build up their confidence in Latin and begin reading from the whole text. So today we're going to move on to task 2, recite the catechism. And some of you have already practiced this at our summer parent practicums, but some of you haven't. Kathy and I always feel like we have to warn people. It seems very simple, but something really important and fundamental is going on. And it is one of those things where you stay on the surface in order to go deep. So Kathy, before we get started practicing today, let's talk about catechism itself. Why don't you give us a definition?
Yeah, so when I think about what is a catechism, well, first of all, you mentioned practicum this summer, and at practicum we learned that even the word catechism comes from a Greek word, catechesis, and it means oral instruction. And so a catechism is where the teacher, the parent, would ask a question, and then the student responds with a memorized answer. So the example I always think of is the Westminster Shorter Catechism that some of us might do with our children to teach foundational Christian doctrine. And the first question in that, I think, is, what is the chief end of man? And then we would answer, man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever.
Tim, you want to add some thoughts to the idea of catechism?
Yeah, it's a fancy word and a big idea, and some of us do know it best from church or from history, but it's not at all an unfamiliar thing. If you've been in our foundations program, then you have catechized your children into all sorts of things, right? We do this all the time, right? We ask, tell me about, and insert a historical name or event, and our children tell us back the information that we've asked them to learn and memorize about those historical facts, mathematical information, history, all sorts of things that we've given them, and we learn those things by the rote repetition, right? By giving them the specific question prompt and then the specific answer information, words that we want them to give us back, and it's really important to remember that repetition is part of it, and that we really are looking for an exact answer. So we're not asking them to just give us back ideas, we're asking them to give us back specific words, because those words go together in the specific ways that we want them to have memorized, to have usable at their fingertips, or to the fingertips of their mind, or the tips of their tongue, so they can be summoned up at any time. And so we don't just review in foundations, we don't just review the one history sentence and the one math fact and the one Latin grammar prompt every week. We also do the review work, because it takes a long time for our brains to store that and put it into that long-term memory where it's there for a long time and not just short-term. We've all crammed for exams, or you've worked hard to memorize something, or you've been in a play where you kind of got behind on your memorizing and you just cram it all in the last minute and it sticks for a little while, mostly. But those many weeks of repetition really do lay it into those tracks of our mind and make it really stick there well. And so it's a commitment, but it's a really good commitment, and it yields a lot of fruit. And I can definitely tell you that the things that my children have memorized about all those foundations memory work have borne a lot of good fruit in their challenge years, as they're able to pull it up and provide context for historical events, or to ease their way in Latin grammar as they work their way up.
Yeah, I always love it when you're in challenge 3 or 4 and song breaks out because you're talking about an idea. Then you know you've done your catechesis well. One thing I enjoyed this summer thinking about as I was working on the article that we read aloud together was that there are all these names built on the idea of catechesis. So you have the process, catechesis, you have the teacher, the catechist, the student, the catechumen, and the curriculum, the catechism. And so I think I'm going to add catechist to my resume. That's one of my job titles now. So you guys can all add it too. If you've been through foundations, you can all add it. And certainly by the time we're through Common Latin, everyone can put that on their resume. So so that was a good background of catechism, what it is and what it's for. But Kathy, tell us about Common Latin. What is this catechism like?
Yeah, so the Catechism in Common Latin is 28 of the most common or the most important and easily recitable, if that's a word, grammar rules. So it gives the students something to hang on to. You know, I know when we're doing Henley Latin right now, we have that whole grammar book full of rules, and there are a lot of rules, but what we've done is we've pulled out 28 of them for the students to recite, and they'll recite every week, every day. So in community, they'll recite the catechism 3 times. And then at home, each day they'll do the new question 3 times, and then also review the old questions. And they repeat those same 28 catechism rules every year. So all the way up through challenge 3 through 2 or 5.
You want to add anything, Tim, to the Common Latin Catechism?
Yeah, I mean, as someone, I'm not a good Latin student. I'm relatively new to the game as myself. My kids are much better at Latin than I am. I do appreciate them because they are the things that are building blocks. They're sort of the fundamentals. And as a parent, I can still occasionally contribute to my children's education in Latin by jumping in there and asking them some of those questions of the fundamentals and say, well, what endings do we see? Let's go through our list of what endings we know. And that can be helpful, even if I don't have the depth of understanding of the syntax that my children are growing in.
Yeah, that's always good. I used to tell my students, my old age capacity for vocabulary is smaller than yours, so I'm going to focus on the syntax and you're going to focus on the vocabulary. So I think that's a good division of labor, Tim, that you described there between parent and student. So I do want to talk about that. We've several of us have touched on it now, but as we know, we're practicing the arts of grammar and dialectic and rhetoric in classical conversations, and we have underneath each of those 5 skills for a total of 15 skills. And speaking of memory, most of us are working on memorizing page 7 of the catalog with the skill, the definition, and the questions and examples that go with them. So, but memorizing, as you know, is one of those 5 core habits of grammar. And so we have defined it on page 7 of the catalog as retaining knowledge through repetition. And that's really what we're talking about here with the catechism. As Tim described, when you recite over and over for a lot of years, like we're going to do in the Common Latin or as we do in foundations, then you put that into your long-term memory and can then begin to understand the things that are in there. Your brain can't understand material that isn't in the brain to work on. So we got to get the facts in there and memorize, and then we can begin to understand. And so if you, like me, if you're fascinated by the old one-room schoolhouse, they taught a lot through catechesis because there was one teacher and many children of many ages. And so that was a very efficient way for them to build that storehouse of knowledge, was to have fixed recitations. So it's a very old pedagogical tool. And if you've looked into anything about medieval education, you will know that they were serious about memorizing and had many, 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 many treatises and tools for memorizing large amounts of information. So sometime when you're bored, you can delve into that topic. So Kathy, when we did the tasks, we put very specific verbs with them. So last week was read vulgate. That makes sense. But here we have recite catechism, not study it. Why did we choose that verb?
That is exactly right. Yeah, to recite, first of all, means to either repeat from memory or even read aloud publicly. And I think both parts of that definition are important because there's something about saying it out loud, speaking it out loud, that helps you engage with that information and helps you memorize it in a different way. I think of it like, we all know John 3:16, for God so loved the world. And once you get started on that verse, you can just spout the whole thing off because you've said it out loud. And so that's how it is with the catechism. Once you hear the question and get started on the answer by saying it out loud, I think it flows a lot better. And the first time you might even read it. So you might read it on the screen or from the paper. We're going to do that in a few minutes. And even just reading it and saying it is the first step in locking that into your memory. And then the second time you go through, you'll find that you're engaged with it in a different way. It's not as new. And you find that you're anticipating what it's going to say. And then by the third time, you might even be able to say it if it's a short one. You might even be able to say it without looking. And the more you do it, then it just becomes ingrained in your memory.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a very physical thing, isn't it? To read aloud or to recite aloud. And it's a communal thing. So I bet if we started off with John 3:16, we can't do it because Teams always has time delays. But if we did that together as a group and it actually worked as if we were in the same room, we would probably fall into some kind of rhythm together as well. And we might even be rocking back and forth, but it becomes this physical act, and that rhythm and that community also adds to the memory, and then it becomes a shared memory as well as a personal memory. And I love that. And when you're in challenge community, there's always a handful of students that you have to stop and slow them down because they don't want to be part of the corporate rhythm. They want to speed ahead, which defeats the purpose of the corporate recitation. So that's always a fun feature too. So you talked about, Kathy, that we're going to recite each question and answer 3 times. So Tim, talk to us about that. Why do we do it 3 times?
Yeah, Kathy started down that road a little bit with talking about it, that you have a growing familiarity with it, which is true. Also, I mean, we all know our own students, right? If you ask them to do it multiple times, they're going to do a little bit of it, and then they're going to fall off of that. So by doing 3 together corporately, like we've already got good steps down the road toward that 7 or more times that it takes us to hear something to really start to get to know it, right? That's what they say, right? There's something about that 7 repetition, 7 encounters, 7 times hearing something that's what it takes for it to start to really sink into the memory. But those first 3 give you getting past there's an unfamiliar word, or that didn't flow the way that I thought it was going to flow the first time I saw it. And by the time you get that 3rd time, you really are headed well down that path. It's comfortable now. And so it's not something that's new feeling. And you've got some repetitions under your belt before you go home to do it every day the rest of the week to make sure that you're really getting it stored properly. And I do think there is something else about that, saying it aloud, in addition to the unity and community that comes with it. When we read it with our eyes and it just goes into our minds, there's no physical thing that's going on there. And speaking it, our bodies have to form the words, and we feel the words as well as say the words. We might not think about it that way, but you're speaking, so you're producing them, you're hearing them as you say them, and your body is feeling them as they're spoken. And that all works together, again, to cement those words into your memory more fully. So I think that's really, really good. And there is also a unity that comes not just in the recitation, but also in the in that memory, in the recollection. So when one of the kids in class pulls up that foundations memory work, the other ones all want to join in and repeat that thing too. And so I think that this repetition and mutual memory builds the sense of community and participation, not just in the storing, but in the recollecting as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of times I'm going to hit on a couple points you said. That one is we forget, because we've been speaking for a long time. We forget that idea of our physical body pronouncing words that are in our minds. And so there's something really important to that. And it's one reason that it's a bit sad that we don't, as a culture, read aloud and recite aloud in church as much as we used to, because there is that physical act. And then, as you said, what that leads to is the community. All being a body and reciting it together. So I appreciate that. We talked in episode 1 about the vision statements for the curriculum, and the last one is about unifying the worldwide body of Christians around reading the Vulgate together. And so now we're adding this idea that we're all also going to be reciting the same catechism rules, which should give us all goosebumps that someone in Oklahoma with an Oklahoma accent and someone in the Philippines is going to be saying these same grammar rules together week after week. And that gives us even that. So we have the family reciting it, we have the community reciting it, and now we have this worldwide community reciting it as well. So, and as we touched on, I talked about the one-room schoolhouse, but we go back even further. This is how the Greeks trained their classically trained orators, was through recitation of set pieces that were written by other people and known. And that's one reason we deliver memorized speeches in Challenge. The Roman schoolboys memorized Virgil and recited it aloud. And then in the medieval university, they did oral exams and an oral disputation with question and answer as one of their modes of instruction. So we forget too what we can accomplish without the technology of paper and pencil. We can do a lot with just our bodies and knowledge that is passed down from a mentor to a disciple. So we've talked about that whole body coming into it. And then we've talked about memorization. So that's one of the core habits of grammar, that, you know, the first set of 15 skills. But we also have memoria in the 5 canons of rhetoric. And we've placed it first on purpose because memoria is a little bit deeper than what we've just been talking about. It is recalling the experiences for a long time. And so we might even, by the time we have students who have studied the Vulgate, they might not only remember the catechism rules, but they might start to remember some of the verses in Latin. And maybe those become exordia to something that they want to present and be persuasive about. And so that memoria, going that long-term, deeper memory of experiences, comes into play when we want to share our knowledge with others and share our testimonies. So that was a lot. Kathy, you want to add to it?
That was a lot. That's a lot to think about. I think about memoria, and I think about as they then get into these other tasks where they're maybe parsing and translating, that those rules, those basic rules, are going to come up in their minds so quickly because they've memorized it. Every little bit of grammar that the student has already memorized then is going to play into looking at these new verses. And we may even look at a verse later and try some of that. It really reminds me of when my children were learning algebra, and they were having to solve more and more complex equations, and how much it helped them to have their multiplication tables memorized and know their squares, know their cubes, because then as they were working with a more complex concept, those things were already ingrained and they could see patterns and they could pull things out more quickly. So I think reciting the catechism just is a way of it's just like having that storage unit right there to be able to pull from. And it's also beautiful just in itself, knowing that you have all these rules memorized.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Kathy knows that when we started, I had been experimenting with this in some book clubs I had led on Latin outside of CC, and then also with my challenge students, because I would have a verse on the whiteboard, And I would say things like, what are the characteristics of Latin verbs? And these very experienced Latin students would be crickets. And so then I would say, well, verbs have some attributes. They have a conjugation, they have a tense, they have a person. You've known this not just in Latin, but you've also known it in English from essentials. And so I started making a list of things that I just needed. And I said to them, when I turn around and say this, I need you to answer me with the 6 characteristics of the verbs. And so Kathy and Tim and I took that list and kind of surveyed Latin grammar and made it a much more official and usable thing for everyone. So I appreciate that that idea of building that storehouse. So now Kathy and Tim are going to practice catechesis for you. I think Kathy, you're going to be the catechist, and Tim is going to be the catechumen, the student.
Yes. Yes. And what I'm going to try to do, Tim, and we'll back up if we need to, is on the 3rd time through, I'm not going to give you the answer. So we'll see how you do here, because you haven't been memorizing these with us. So let's see. Yeah, it'll be quiz time. Let me go to the right place here. There we go. Okay, Tim, you ready?
Ready.
All right. What are the attributes of Latin nouns?
Latin nouns have 4 attributes: declension, gender, number, case.
All right. What are the attributes of Latin nouns?
Latin nouns have 4 attributes: declension, gender, number, case.
Okay, and I'll back up if I need to. What are the attributes of Latin nouns?
Latin nouns have 4 attributes: gender, declension, number, case. Declension, gender, number, and case.
There we go. Great job. The next one's a little longer. What is the adjective agreement rule? By the way, this is my favorite rule. What is the adjective agreement rule?
An adjective agrees with the noun it modifies in gender, number, and case, but not in declension.
What is the adjective agreement rule?
An adjective agrees with the noun it modifies in gender, number, and case, but not in declension.
We may have to back up on this one. What is the adjective agreement rule?
An adjective agrees. Oh, you gave it to me.
I did. I'm getting you started.
Thanks. An adjective agrees with the noun it modifies in gender, number, and case, but not in declension.
Yeah, I tried to move away from it right in the middle to trick you. Last one. What are the 5 main noun cases?
Nominative, subject, genitive, possessive, dative, indirect object, accusative, direct object, ablative, object of the preposition.
Good. What are the 5 main noun cases?
Nominative, subject, genitive, possessive, dative, indirect object, accusative, direct object, ablative, object of the preposition.
Okay, let's see if you can do it. What are the 5 main noun cases?
Nominative, subject, genitive, possessive, dative, indirect object, accusative, direct object, ablative, object of the preposition.
Very good. That one was harder because it was longer. That's also one of the foundation's memory work. So for some of us, that one's going to be a little bit easier. So that was fun. One of the things I want you to notice is that did not take very long to do. And we did three of them 3 times. So Jennifer, I'm really curious, as you sat and just listened, I'm curious what you heard or what you observed with us doing that.
Yeah, it was really fun to be on the sidelines watching. So it seems like Tim, as the student catechumen, was just getting used to the sense of the words the first time through. What are the words and what sequence are they in? And the second time, you could tell he's beginning to anticipate his answer. Before you finished the question, I could tell his body language said, I'm ready to go because I know this answer. And then the third time, a lot of times, even if you showed him the answer, he was closing his eyes. So clearly he was pulling out that it had gone in some. And so even when you tried to give him help, he was pulling it out on his own, but he had to really concentrate. So he closed his eyes and thought. And I liked how, Tim, you caught yourself. You had the right 4 on the second question, and you just needed to reorder them. And you very quickly realized that you had them in the wrong order. And does the order matter? No. The reason the order matters is for memory and for that corporate recitation. And so he was already familiar enough to correct himself. And so that was really fun to watch.
Yeah, I thought that was fun to do. And one of the things I want everybody to notice is that we're not explaining the grammar as we're doing this. We're just working quickly, but reciting those rules. The grammar study will come later with these. And for the parent at home, the parent who maybe is learning Latin for the first time with their students, the parent doesn't have to understand the rules yet either. It's easy for the parent to just read the question and have the student recite. And that's something that the whole family can do together. Even the 5 and 6 year olds will start getting these rules into their brain just from doing it together.
Yeah. How about you, Tim? From the student perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, as an adult student, there's always performance anxiety, doing things that you aren't going to do well in front of others the first time. But definitely, but kids don't have that problem, right? They're happy. Little kids are happy to recite an error and then recite again. But our teenagers, maybe they're going to have a little bit more of that, and that's going to be. But if they're doing it together, and that's the good thing about doing it together in community is they will all have to work at it, and they'll all stumble at times, and then they'll all get better at it. So that's a good thing. Yeah, and it is like the words are there. You know what, you have them in your head, but they're not maybe well shaped, well secured yet. If I did that 7 or 8 or 10 times today, I would probably be better at it. Or if I did it every day, if I practice this every time between now and when we came back for our next book club, it'd probably be pretty smooth by then. So yeah, but having to practice the recollection piece and not just the reading aloud piece was really helpful. I think that's a big piece of the memorizing too, is moving off script and practicing it without the visual cue.
Yeah. And really making that oral catechism. Yes. So as the catechist, I do some things when I'm in challenge that you may not have to do at home because you have fewer students. First of all, I dramatically hold up a finger for round 1, round 2, and round 3 so that they remember they're not stopping after round 1. They know that we're going to do it again. And then if they do either stumble or fail to answer together, then I have them do it a 4th or even a 5th time, just so that we can practice the community aspect of the catechism as well. So yeah, so I think we all just learned the attributes of Latin nouns, that they have declension, gender, number, and case, and that will help us when we begin to read. So going back to task 1 and then going forward to the tasks where we parse and translate, if you want to read the word vitam, life, which we looked at in episode 2, then you need to know that it is a first declension noun, that it has the gender of feminine, it has the number of singular. You have 1 life, as far as I know, unless you're a cat. And in that case, because it ends in am, it is the accusative case. So we know that it's being the direct object. And so that grammar rule is going in, and it's good for memory, but it's also preparing you to read and translate well. As we talked about in episode 1, every strand in classical conversations has a verse associated with it and 3 curriculum vision statements, one that governs the classical aspect of that curriculum, one that governs the Christian, and one that governs the community aspect of that curriculum piece. And so for the grammar strand, where we are going to be studying Common Latin, we have our very familiar verse, John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then we have it here in Latin: in principio erat verbum, et verbum erat apud Deum, et Deus erat verbum, from Johannes 1:1. I'm practicing. I'm not quite as smooth as Kathy at reading. So let's take our strand verse and practice the catechism rules that we just learned. So Tim, which catechism question came to your mind as you're looking at this on the screen?
The first one that we practice together, asking what are the 4 attributes, because I know that in here are some nouns, which is good, right? And so now I can look at it and say, well, what nouns do I recognize? And I'm going to say verbum, I can pick out as a noun, right, the word here. And so now my question is, if it has 4 attributes, what are those 4 attributes for this particular noun? And since thankfully I'm not being put on the spot, I got to do a little preparation, because again, I'm not a very accomplished Latin student. Whereboom, I have researched and know now that it has, it's a second declension noun, that it is neuter in its gender, it is singular in its number, and its case is that it's nominative. And I'm going to pull a little from my essentials knowledge. It's because it is connected with the linking verb, right? So in the beginning was, no, the word was, it is the subject of the sentence, even though it's named out of order. for our model sentences, it's still the subject, so it's a nominative.
Nice. All right. So you picked whereboom, so I'm going to pick deus. One of the things that we can help us with when we're beginning students is that, and my students always love to do this, is I can pick out proper nouns very easily because they are capitalized. And so it is easy for me to choose that word deus. And I know that it's God because I know this verse very well in English. The word was God. So now I need to think about what you recited, Tim. It has a declension, a gender, a number, and a case. And so I do know that it's second declension because it ends in us, which we've memorized in foundations. It is masculine because of natural gender, because it's God and he's masculine, but also because it's in the second declension. And then it is singular because we have one God. And since it's capitalized, it is the God. And there's only one of him. And it is nominative, like Tim said, because we have a subject and predicate nominative kind of sentence pattern going on here. And Kathy and Tim, I'm going to let you guys keep going.
I was going to say, I'm going to pick out the word principio, and principio is based on the word principium, principii, and it is second declension. It's declension, gender, number, case. It's second declension. It is neuter. It is singular, and it's ablative. It's the object of the preposition in that sentence. So that was fun. Something else I'd like to say as we're working through this verse and kind of using those catechism rules, the real deeper purpose of the catechism is so that when you work with a verse and play with words, you can pull up those rules, and that allows you to be able to do what we just did. But that's not the purpose. That's not what you really do in task 2 when you're reciting the catechism. That should be really quick. You just take a few minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and to work through catechism questions.
Yeah, we're kind of taking a little liberty here. This is would be part of your catechism day at home, right? Your task 2 at home. We're going a little bit sideways on what it would look like to explore this, and then to show a little bit how it connects to the actual study of Latin, because this is what you will do later in task 6, right, Kathy?
Yeah, task 6, exactly. And so we can think a little bit and talk a little bit about how do we actually use this catechism at home? How do we practice it? We talked about how it is brief. Task 2 comes right after task 1, so it's something that the family can do together. If they've sat around the table in task 1 and are reading the Vulgate together, you can move right into task 2 and recite the catechism. Shouldn't take a lot of time. We've talked about that. I would suggest reciting the new catechism question for that lesson 3 times, but then backing up. So maybe go to the last 6 and go through all of them once. And of course, all of the questions are listed in the appendix of the curriculum. So you don't have to flip through pages to find each question as a mom if you don't have all of those memorized. So you can just back up for about 6 of them, practice reciting through them, and then maybe once a week go through the whole catechism. And that, of course, will get longer and longer as you progress through the year until you can do all 28 of them. It shouldn't take more than 15 or 20 minutes at the most, I would say, to read through and recite through all of the catechism questions. I think the one with the 5 cases of nouns, that's probably one of the longer ones, the longer answers. Tim, do you have any other thoughts about doing this at home?
Yeah, I mean, like everything that we do that's new to us, it will probably start off being a little uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
The first time through the catechism, some of those words will be unfamiliar, like, is it ablative, ablative, right?
Mm-hmm.
We sort of feel our way through. Thankfully, again, you have community to help you sort out some of those things as you go. But in 3 times reciting them, they start to become familiar, and after you've done it once through for the year, both the pattern of it will be very familiar and the content. So it seems like a lot. I mean, 28 of these sounds like a lot to memorize, but when you're doing it daily or almost daily, or your students are anyway, they'll get it really quickly, especially if they've been exercising that memorizing muscle very regularly. But even as an adult, hearing it enough times, encountering it that many times, it starts to sink in, even if you're not actively trying to memorize it. Just the repetitions of hearing it and saying it over and over really do its work. Maybe more slowly for us than for our kids, but it does work.
I agree. I think even the parent who is not able to put as much time into their Latin as they would like are going to memorize these rules just by doing them with their children. I think that's going to be good. And then there's a saying, it's perseverantia vincit. It means perseverance conquers. And it's that compounding effect of being diligent and persevering in these small tasks. And then that's going to lead to just a great reward at the end. I think day by day, question by question.
I think too, it's really good because even though, Kathy, you've done a really nice job of lining up these catechism questions with the content, so they match really well with the other things that they're going to be studying week by week throughout. They also incorporate things that you may not actively be using a lot of yet. So that first tour student who's getting nouns for the first time, they're going to spend a lot of time with nominative nouns for a while, right? And the other, like ablative, they're not really going to be doing a lot with that for quite a while. And so there's a little bit of a preview thing, right? There's some words in there that are getting them ready for future lessons, for future ideas, and for the older student who's off there spending a lot of time with datives and noun clauses. The review of relaying those facts, like, okay, you can get lost in the weeds pretty easily. Let's make sure you still have those first things ready at your fingertips so that we can revisit them as needed. That's also really good. So this review, preview, cycling through is just such a natural way for us to learn, and again, unifying, because whether you got a challenge 3, Latinist on your hands, or a challenge A first time, and you're just fumbling through it with them and just trying to figure out how to do all this Latin thing, you're doing it together, right? You're building that unity around something that the challenge 2 student may be more fluent with it, but the challenge A student's doing the same thing.
I agree. I think that's the beauty of it. And that's really with the whole curriculum, we're going to find that we're going to see that unity within the family. We're going to see it within the community. We're all on the same Latin catechism question that week. And then just knowing that everybody that's using the curriculum around the world are reciting the same rules, I think is super good. So we'll do a Q&A in just a moment. But before we do that, I just wanted to show everybody, if you go to the leebortons.com website, you can click on her book clubs, and she has the whole schedule for the year of what book clubs are coming up. So our next one will be next Wednesday, and we'll be doing task 3, memorize vocabulary. So with those thoughts. I'm going to open it up for questions and answers now. So if you have any, I'll open the chat up. And Tim,
Kathy,
maybe
I was
you
kind
can.
of trying to help you in the chat a little bit once Jennifer slipped out. So
Okay,
I can
great.
help if you want me to read the questions to you. I did put
Sure.
answers. I mean, they're right, but I don't know if they're the official answers. So I will read them and you can elaborate on them. So the first one was, where can we find the 3 verses for each strand?
Each strand actually has one verse, one theme verse. So probably the one that you're most familiar with is the words aptly spoken verse, because that's our, right? We all know the words aptly spoken products that we make. That's the exposition strand verse. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and settings of silver. That's the strand verse for exposition. So John 1:1 is the grammar strand verse. So every strand will have one. And yes, they are all found in the challenge guides in the why section.
Nice. The other question was, is this discussion on the strand verse part of task 2? It seems more like the study syntax task.
It is study syntax. So what we did was a little bit out of order because we wanted to show you how you could use the catechism questions and the importance of these catechism questions as you work on later tasks. Because what we were doing really was could be part of the syntax if we're on that noun lesson, or it could be part of the task 6, parse and translate, because the Tour 1 students will read a verse. There'll be a lot that they don't know in it, but then there will be some things they do know. And what we focused on was nouns, which is from lesson 2. And so we used that catechism question as we were parsing some of those nouns.
Good. You want me to keep reading them? Sure. I don't mind.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Where will the catechism be located and who will have access to it? When will the catechism be available?
So as Kathy said, the whole catechism is collected in the appendix of the Common Latin Curriculum book that's coming out next year. The specific catechism question for the weekly lesson will be in each week as well. So you'll have both the whole thing in the back and what you need for this week in the weekly lesson. And many of them are actually also found on cards in the Latin flashcards sets that Kathy put together for the Foundation's flashcards. So for those of you who have Foundation students, looking forward to preparing for Common Latin, that would be another way to encounter some, but not all of the catechism questions.
And then at what point in the 30-week year are all 28 grammar rules presented?
They're presented each week. So beginning on lesson 1 is the first catechism question, and then each week adds a new catechism question, except for weeks 15 and 30, because those are the Blue Book weeks. So by the end of the year, you'll have the whole list memorized. Of course, you can always look in the back of the book in the appendix and read through all 28 right away if you want to, just to see what's there.
Good. And then will each challenge level have its own book?
No, each challenge level will use the same book. So one Common Latin curriculum for 5 tours, kind of like we do in Essentials, where there's 3 tours. You go deeper each time.
That's all so far.
Good. We'll wait just a minute, see if any other questions come up, and then looks like Jennifer may not make it back, Tim, so you can close us out once we're ready.
Oh, there's one more. How rigorous will the curriculum be compared to Henley?
That's a really good question. The beauty of this curriculum is that you can make it as rigorous or as peaceful as fits your family. So because the content that they're going to be practicing the syntax and the forms with is the Latin Vulgate, it's an endlessly deep well of Latin to encounter and engage with. but there's also no expectation that a 2 or 1, 2, 3 student is going to be able to do everything that's in any given verse in Scripture. So the student who's really bucking to push ahead and get to know things can spend a lot of time with the Common Latin grammar and a dictionary and figure out as much as they are curious to know. And the student who really is just ready to just skim across the surface and pick up those first declension nouns and give them their gender, number, declension in case, that's good enough if that's where you're happy with them to be as their parent teacher.
That's a great answer, Tim. There's so much depth in the Vulgate and so many conversations that will spring from that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, it's really, really good to be able to be in that place for it. Let's see, we got a hand up.
Yeah. So I was wondering when the curriculum releases for the challenge levels, what is the vision for how foundations families might use the curriculum at home?
That's another great question. We covered some of this on our episode 1. So if you haven't watched that one, I would suggest going back and watching that whole thing. We gave the whole vision of the curriculum and the different parts of the curriculum, and then talked a little bit about how a family can use it together. There's a couple of things I think you can do with a family that has foundations age children in amongst also the challenge age children, because we love big families. And one of them is have the foundation students there with you when you're reading the Vulgate together. If they're a non-reader, have them listen. If they're a reader, let them try to read a verse or two or a phrase or two. We also came out this year with flashcards that are meant for foundations age students. So that would be a way for them to preview some of the vocabulary that they're going to encounter when they hit the challenge years.
Yeah, and especially these first couple tasks, absolutely, you can include your younger children in reading and hearing the Vulgate together, in practicing the Catechism together. There's no lower age limit for those activities. Once you get into some of the others, the tasks 4, 5, and 6, it will be more challenging for a younger student. Mm-hmm. But these first 3 tasks, we'll do vocabulary next week, and that's very doable by a foundation student too. So you can definitely be previewing some things with your younger students as you'd like to include them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Kathy, there's 3 more in the chat if you have time.
Okay. Sure.
One is, my student has taken the National Latin exam every year after challenge. How will this curriculum prepare them for the exam?
Tim, do you want to tackle that one? Or?
Sure. So definitely the National Latin exam has never lined up one-to-one with any curriculum, Henley included. This curriculum will have some strengths that are different than Henley. I think that students using Common Latin will find themselves to be much more flexible and curious students of Latin, which will serve them well. And when they get to the National Latin exam and they encounter things there that don't necessarily follow the patterns of the curriculum that they've been following, like Henley or others, where it may not do as much will be in the areas particularly pertaining to sort of Roman culture, Roman history questions. Obviously, we're not reading Caesar here the way that we did with Henley. And so some additional studies would be advised for preparing for the National Latin exam on that front. And we do have some resources for that. The Kings of Rome series that we publish through Copper Lodge Library provides a lot of really great Latin history. And of course, you can always read the Aeneid with your kids to pick up some good things too. But yeah, you'll just need to supplement a little differently, making a plan for how to find those things on the National Latin exam that aren't directly addressed in Common Latin curriculum.
Tim, I think too that a lot of students are going to have a really solid foundation using Common Latin. The way we've laid the charts out and with the catechism questions and with giving them little bits of grammar, syntax along the way, and then trying to apply all that to the Vulgate rather than simple made-up sentences, I think it's going to be a big benefit to them.
Yeah.
I already have challenge tutors inquiring if they can utilize the catechism in upper challenges 2 through 4, even though they are doing Henley. They are thrilled about the coming commonality this will provide for future students. Are they able to use it too?
That's a good question. Well, we'll have to explore that. It's possible that we could make the catechism available. But yeah, we'll talk about that, and we've heard the request, and we'll talk about it ourselves and see if we can make that happen.
Stephanie has a question.
Can I just expound on that?
Yeah.
They're just talking about even how like the math map then provided the artwork for the exordium and anything to launch.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of just looking at it like that, since grammar rules are grammar rules. But
Right.
Yes. Yep.
Good. And then will the Latin Vulgate include the Apocrypha books? I don't know that I said that exactly.
No, we're right. The Latin curriculum includes part of your purchase is 2 parallel readings that we've produced. The students first semester are going through Genesis, and second semester they're going through the writings of John in the New Testament.
Yeah, they look like this. They're beautiful.
And
so it's parallel readings across the page, so you can get the Latin on one side and the English on the other. And and yeah, it's Genesis and the works of first semester Genesis. Second semester is the works of St. John. So there's none of the Apocryphal books are included in the assigned curriculum readings. Of course, if that's part of your family tradition and you want to expand and explore into other parts of Scripture, go for it. But we aren't producing those any other books besides the Genesis and the works of St. John.
That's it.
Good.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. Next week, we'll move on and do task 3, which is memorize vocabulary. Again, some of you have encountered a little bit of that at Parent Practicum already. If you went this year, if you haven't been to Practicum yet, go. It's really great and such a good preview for any kind of language study, including using Henley, but particularly a good jump start on the Common Latin curriculum. And we'll explore both why vocabulary is so important and not just a list of words that we look up in a dictionary, and also some wonderful ways that we can practice learning vocabulary in ways that are effective for memory and maybe a little bit fun, which is also great. And because I'm a bit of a philosophy buff, vocabulary is words. Words are the ways that we name things in reality. And so as the culture around us sort of tends toward the disintegration of language and the meaning of words, this is one of those ways that we become keepers of the word, and we need to make sure that we are doing that well. So until we see you next time, ora et labora, work and pray. Wale.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.